If you follow the independent horror movie circuit, or you've just been keeping up on new stuff to watch while you're all stuck indoors, it's likely you've heard about a new feature called Blood Quantum. Previously a big hit a few months ago on the festival scene, picked up for distribution by Shudder with an eye on VOD and theatrical rollout in the fall, but instead released directly to Shudder's streaming network when the global lockdown went into effect in order to avoid the likelihood of delayed studio releases choking out the indie market in the fall. If you've only heard the title, or are just hearing about it now for the first time, the premise goes something like this. It's a zombie movie starting in an alternate timeline 1981, set mainly in and around a First Nations Indigenous Native reservation in Canada, and starring a cast of mostly First Nations and Native American Indigenous actors. And when it begins, quite deliberately, in about the same place most Walking Dead-alikes do, there's an unexplained zombie outbreak turning dead people into flesh eaters, the infection is rapidly spreading by zombie bites, there's a twist. The specific small Indigenous tribe living on this particular reservation happens to be genetically immune to the zombie virus. They can die, they can get bitten, but they can't get infected or become zombies themselves. And as far as they or anyone else can tell, since, 1981, no internet, isolated location, fast-moving apocalypse, they might be the only immune people on Earth, meaning that when the film jumps ahead a few months from pre to post-apocalypse, the main characters are now facing a situation where their reservation might be the last outpost of human civilization, and they need to manage not only the zombies, but the onset of winter and what to do about the various wandering, white people who continue arriving seeking shelter on their land. Now, this isn't a review of Blood Quantum, because this isn't my review show, that's the other show. I don't know if I'll be republishing a full review of it there, because we only get to run one of those a week, and I can't always do everything I want to at a given time, though if I did run a review of Blood Quantum there, it'd probably be like a longer version of this. The reason I bring it up here mainly is because it's illustrative of a point that I don't think it's made often enough. See, when I was describing the plot of this up above, I can only assume that a lot of people had already formed a basic idea of what this was likely to be given the subject matter and what was supposed to be different about it. A horror film in a well-worn genre centering a cast of minority actors with a socially conscious subtext to its narrative, i.e. Indigenous North Americans once again finding themselves in a world-changing nexus between land, borders, wandering settlers, and a plague, having to manage the moral and practical realities thereof with killer zombies as a bigger-than-life inciting incident. The whole familiar horror trope as socio-political allegory thing has become a common enough subgenre in and of itself at this point, and as such, like many folks when I first heard about this one, my assumption was that sounds really interesting, but I also had a pretty good guess as to the manner it would be interesting in. Contemplative, high-minded, focused on mood, atmosphere, probably still intermittently violent, because Shudder knows their audience, but with also a lot of downtime, talking about the various issues and subjects that the broader narrative is clearly raising, the kind of horror film critics end up describing as scary, but also thoughtful. And this movie ain't that movie. At all. Now that's not to say it's not smart or thoughtful and that the various metaphors and think about this, message stuff isn't like right the hell there, but subtle and contemplative and highbrow, it is not. This is an old school, balls to the wall, gory, headshots, bloody, guts ripping out, chainsaw, shotgun, samurai sword, axe to the face, gory as hell, how many ways can we kill people in 90 minutes, all the splatter that matters, fun, grindhouses, drive-in, zombie horror flick that's meant to make crowds scream, cheer, and generally go nuts, that also happens to be sincerely a pop culture landmark, and that no one has really done a movie like this in this kind of setting centering these characters with a cast of these actors, many of whom are making their feature debuts or have relatively few major screen credits prior to this, and almost none of whom have been cast as leads before, to say nothing of playing badass zombie-killing heroes with iconic signature weapons and big battle scenes. It gets its points across, certainly, and has its share of things to say, however subtly, and it's chiefly important simply by virtue of existing and proving that it can exist, but all the while still being very much the opposite of what one imagines generally comes to mind when someone hears the pitch allegorical horror film with a socially conscious subtext. But why is that? That is to say, why should any of that be particularly surprising? Why should I or anyone else, as I know I was not the only person who was surprised but pleasantly so to find that the film was not only good but good in this particular way, find it in any way unusual that a film or any other work of art can be insightful, smart, thoughtful, groundbreaking, and socially meaningful while also being a crazy fun good time? Why should it be an unexpected thing to be thinking, this is a landmark moment in the history of on-screen representation for Native actors, and also, Vegas threw that guy out the window and he's hanging by his guts because he's cut in half, that rules, in the same scene. I mean, there's no law that says it can't be both things, right? But it feels like there is. Like, in the same way it feels like just a little bit askew when you remember that the Black Panther, a character who will be in film history textbooks referencing 21st century sea change and the portrayal of black and African protagonists in the adoption of Afrofuturist sci-fi aesthetic in mainstream cinema, is also like friends with Spider-Man and a character who walks around Disney World now, or whenever they open Disney World again. Like, it feels like there's meant to be a wall there, but only really in our heads, and for really no good reason, like a kind of self-imposed cultural imperialism that says certain topics are only to be discussed in serious circumstances or in the correct fashion, as though pairing them with, in these examples, a horror film or a comic book movie might diminish or detract from them somehow. But who gets to make that decision? The filmmakers and the actors who choose to present themselves and the audience who receive the results, or some nebulous body of academic theoretical authority before anything has even been attempted? And that's not to say that we don't need movies that are strictly contemplative and thoughtful, or ones that are just for fun with nothing else under the hood, but sometimes you can do both things, and it's a mistaken assumption we should all get better at overcoming to think that it's unusual to try or to succeed at that. I'm Bob, and that's the big picture. I just realized I don't remember if I was truly sick of zombie apocalypse movies prior to the actual apocalypse. Huh. Isn't that funny? I imagine these quasi-nihilistic end-of-days gallows humor gags might feel strange in the context to viewers in smart, intelligently managed parts of the world that are already partway to the other side of this thing, but I'm not in one of those, so just trying to laugh through another week. Saw coyotes yesterday. Blood Quantum is an end-of-the-world zombie outbreak movie that is, among other things, very smart and respectful of its audience's intelligence vis-a-vis the fact that not only horror fans are likely to have seen plenty of zombie movies, but also, The Walking Dead has been on TV fucking forever at this point, so pretty much everybody knows how this is going to go down and can skip over the everybody knows how this works parts and get right to the new, different, interesting parts, of which there are a lot. Short version, we're in rural Canada in an alternate timeline, 1981, where at some point not long before the start of the film, but far from where our main story's starting out, something has gone down that's caused the dead to rise as flesh-eating zombies that spread zombieism virally through bites, and since this is all breaking out pre-internet mass communication, human civilization pretty much does not stand a chance, and we're in full-bore post-apocalypse survivors building communities in fortified frontier strongholds mode, pretty much by the start of Act 2 mere months later. Now, this is all staged really cool with the familiar beats, background noise of police band chatter, crazy guys that turn out to be way more than just crazy, and the inevitable guy suddenly bursting through the emergency room doors telling everyone to run, and drunk drifter and lockup being way more than drunk actually, sequences that are all given the kind of slickly executed polish where you go, yeah, it's a greatest hits of zombie movies, but they're playing them really well. Plus the actual first thing that ain't right reveal that something's going wrong is so nifty and original, I pretty much sat up and went, oh shit, this is gonna be good, isn't it? Like right the hell away. But the real immediate standout that continues on into the broader narrative that makes this not just a terrific horror film, but something genuinely groundbreaking, and not just in the obvious way, is its main conceit and setting. While the zombie plague is that evidently ravaging the entire world, our focus begins and stays all but exclusively within and with the residents of the Red Crow, a small First Nations Indigenous Native Peoples reservation whose experience of the outbreak ends up differing from the rest of the world in exactly one respect. By unexplained, apparently genetic quirk of fate, the tribe on this reservation are immune to the plague. They can get bitten without becoming zombies, and it's possible they're the only people on Earth for whom that's the case. And so we have our setup, an above-ground takeoff on the Day of the Dead zombie apocalypse as wilderness fort with winter coming riff, with the additional genre tweaking of the folks in charge of the fort being Native North Americans, and thus the historic value of Blood Quantum to be the first big-scale indigenous zombie epic, featuring a big and impressive cast of First Nations and Native American actors, making either their film debut or close to it, and certainly having not appeared in roles this prominent or as leads before for the most part. And if you're thinking, hey, a scenario where First Nations people are now in charge of the last outpost of human civilization and would have to make decisions about whether to take in non-immune survivors rescued from outside, considering how other people in the world have let things be for them over the centuries, plus the whole obvious allegories and metaphors for plagues and colonialism. Gee, you think the movie might be about something other than zombies as well? And yes, that's in there, but part of what's both thrilling and fascinating about the film is that while it's easy to imagine this same premise and setup, especially weighted with the cultural baggage being the first of its kind, the knowledge of how indigenous characters have been played for villains or buffoons in the genre previously, etc., being executed in more of a somber, solemn, art house type tone, heavy on the meditative dialogue and academic pretense, plausibly even to good effect, but Blood Quantum, even as it's more than prepared to grapple with the bigger questions its premise sets up and the bold statements that its protagonists make, frankly, just by existing, also wants to kick ass. And it's a good decision because this movie kicks some ass. I mean, straight up, this movie is one of the best zombie flicks of the 21st century, right up there with Train to Busan. And it's precisely because it's a total hat trick. It's doing something not only different but noble and important by giving the spotlight to a whole cast of hero characters you just never see in roles like this. It's smart and thoughtful while not being preaching and stultifying. And it's also hell-bent on delivering top-tier, no bullshit, blood-splattering, gut-munching, gore-spewing, chainsaw, shotgun, samurai sword, battle axe, whatever the hell else is they got, horror mayhem, because who the hell decided you can't do all of that at once? There's terrific scares, really good gore, unexpected plot turns, a well-balanced set of storylines, surprisingly large cast of well-developed characters, almost like they wanted to make sure if they only got to do this once, they broke every piece of ground they could while they were here. I mean, you hear a premise for this and you think, oh wow, you know, if they do this right and there's one really standout cool guy with a cool zombie killing weapon, he becomes like the indigenous version of Ash, right? But then the actual movie has like 3 or 4 guys who could all be that, plus well-developed women, younger and older actors, and some very nasty zombies as well. Honestly, folks, I can't recommend Blood Quantum enough, because really, in the context of what do you want out of a zombie movie, it does damn near everything I could hope for it to do right. There's nothing really wrong with this. I could quibble about the length of this or that scene, some uneven tonal business, but they'd be minor criticisms next to how much fun it is to just watch this on its own and how satisfying it is to see something where you can just tell everyone involved was trying to do something special, gave it their all, left everything on the field, and it actually paid off. So yeah, 9 out of 10 for Blood Quantum. This is currently streaming on the Shudder Horror channel in the US, has other distribution avenues worldwide with greater options apparently to come down the line. Definitely check this one out, one of the best films of the year so far. See it as soon as you can.